The other problem I have with the portal is it's the rich get richer. You take the Power 5 or Power 4 now, I guess, conferences, and they're going to watch a kid play at one of the other 5 conferences or D2 even, and they'll find somebody, this kid has grown, they've gotten better, 2 years stronger. Now we're going down and poach that kid,
Wow.
and take them out of there. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's hurt high school recruiting. I really do. I think it's harder for kids in high school now because people are using more and more of their scholarships on portal kids.
Was it important for you to be able to carry on a conversation with the player, or were you looking for more conversation with the parents during that recruiting process? What was your line of thinking during that time?
Well, I go back to what we were talking about. Who's going to have the greatest influence? If the parents are probably going to move them to a direction, we definitely wanted a connection there. But at the same time, one of the things that I loved about coaching was developing a personal relationship with the players and getting to know them. So I enjoyed talking to the players more because that was who I was going to be coaching. That was who's going to become part of our family, and that's how we viewed this, was we are family, and so some kids are just easier to talk with, than others. I mean, some kids are quiet and they're kind of shy, and but you want to try to make them feel comfortable. You want to put them in a zone where they can be comfortable with you. Other kids are more outgoing and vibrant and everything, and they're a lot easier to visit with.
Right.
Jordan was one of those. And we had a great connection there. So again, I think though, if the parent is the one who's going to have the greatest influence on them, then we would want to make sure that we understood them, they understood us, we had a good rapport there. But I would never trump the player, because in the end, it's the player who we're going to spend the majority of the time with, and we're going to have to have a relationship with each other.
Right. Now that you've said this before, that the recruiting process has changed, do you see social media playing a role in recruiting, and would that have influenced you to recruit a kid, seeing them on social media?
Well, recruiting is like life, and kids today, that's all they do in this world is social media.
Right.
I remember one time I was by the softball coach at one of our schools. I'd gone over, in the afternoon and walked over, and they were playing a game, and game got over, and the softball coach and I were walking to our cars, and he said, "Hey, I need to get a hold of this kid." And he saw the kid up there. So he calls her on the phone, and she won't pick up. So then he texts her. And so she stops and she texts him right back. I mean, they love to text, they love to, all this stuff, but, they don't really, personal contact, that's not always big for them. But as an old school guy, social media scared me because I wasn't great with it. And I would much rather recruit personally. My favorite thing to do recruiting was go and sit down with the family and to visit with them, whether it be on campus or at their place or whatever.
What were you looking for there when you would do that? What were the keys or clues for you?
I just felt like I could connect to them better. I could read body language. I could tell if I was getting through to them or if they're just kind of sitting there going like, I don't like this guy, or I don't like what he's telling me, So I felt like I could just go to another level, say, than over the phone, or texting, and that really scared me. But kind of going back to your point is, yes, social media was becoming huge. And I'm sure it's even more so now. Probably why all the coaches nowadays are young, because they can relate more to that kind of lifestyle. But I'll tell you what I did see, and this kind of goes along with it, is that players have the ability now to market themselves than ever before.
Yeah.
And we would get videos, or we would get, whatever it might be from players. And to be honest, we followed up on that because you never knew. I mean, I've signed some kids that I got a letter from in the old days, or I got an email from with video, currently, that we would check out and say, hey, this kid can play, And so, but I will say this, parents, do not send highlight videos, please, send a full game. I could make anybody in this country look like an All-American with a 2-minute highlight video.
Very true.
So when I got a highlight video, I might look at it for a little bit, but I'd send it away. And I usually text back, please send me a full game, because I want to see everything. I want to see your total game, not just your best points.
Exactly. And Coach, let's dig in for a little bit. When AAU season would start up, beginning of the summer, And coaches would gear up to go visit, I guess, what was it, Deep South and
Right.
what it
Yeah.
run for the
Run for the
Roses and
Roses. Right.
Apache and the other tournaments around the country. When you're going to those venues, you're walking in the door. What are you looking for? What clues from the players on the floor? And you talked about attitude on the floor for players as well. What advice would you tell parents? Is it important to go to these types of tournaments, or do they really don't need to do it? And when they go to these tournaments, what do they need to make sure they're doing or encouraging their child to do so that they're getting noticed by college?
Oh, that's a big question, Mike. Well, there's a lot of things. There are a lot of things there because,
Yeah.
you're dealing with thousands of players possibly. When you were in Louisville, there's
Yeah.
what, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 courts.
Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
you 10 minutes
There's
to
more
go.
now. There's more
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
So, but here's one thing about recruiting those venues that I noticed. A kid can look a whole lot different on day 1 or 2 as opposed to day 7 or 8 when we strung them together like that. Those kids get
Wow.
tired.
Yeah.
They play 3 games a day a lot of times. They're usually air conditioned, but still, and so it's really hard sometimes to get a consistent view because those kids may play 9, 10 games or more than that in just 3, 4 days.
Right.
And so, we try to keep that into consideration. But when you found a kid that you really liked and they're playing about as hard on day, 7 or 8 as they were playing on day 1 or 2, that's probably a special kid.
That's good.
And so, it's and their legs would go. And so a lot of
Mm,
times their shooting would be different. They probably weren't going to shoot the ball quite as well. And so trying to make an evaluation on a kid, particularly later in the week, can be a little bit, scary. But, once we found a kid, once we locked into a kid, most of the time we had and offered a kid, most of the time we had one of our staff at every one of their games in the summer.
okay.
And, for you guys, we saw you guys play every game, going into Jordan's senior year, and we had somebody there because we, number one, wanted to sit on them and make
Right.
sure that they knew we were interested.
Right.
I always told our coaches, once we offer somebody, we want to recruit them so hard that they don't want to tell us no. They just said break their heart to say, "Oh, I don't want to tell Coach Drown no." And that was kind of our philosophy in terms of we wanted them to know how much we wanted them.
So when you're walking in that gym, coach, are you looking at parents' reactions to kids on the floor? Are you watching the parents as well?
Oh yes, yeah, and like I said, that's gotten more important over the last several years. And everybody's going to be upset occasionally with a officials call or and everything. But what really bothers me the worst, Michael, is when a kid will come over and then they'll look up in the stands and some parent is talking to them, coaching them, and their coach is right there, and but they're not focused on anything else. But that worries me just a little bit because that's telling me they haven't there's not a break there like there should be when they're on the floor. And so yeah, I think parents need to understand their actions are being watched also, you know
That's good.
and I think that's important because coaches have enough problems, to be honest, without dealing with
That's true.
parents.
That's very
And
true.
so that may sound harsh to parents out there and they may click off your podcast here, but that's just the honest truth.
Right. Very true. Well, I got one question and then we'll jump to the transfer portal again and talk a little bit more about that. But when it comes to the academic portion for the student athlete when they're in high school, is that important to a college coach? How does that factor in at the end of the day?
Well, yeah, it's not our number one thing. Like we talked about earlier, can they play? Can they compete athletically? Those are the first two. And after you get through those two, okay, yeah, this player can meet both of those. Well, now you start again separating, and academics is one of the big separators. And again, for us, it wasn't so much GPA or test scores as it was, do we believe this player can graduate? Do we believe this kid wants to graduate? Not just come to play, but that they want to come and get an education, get that degree, and at the same time get to play 4 years of college basketball. So yeah, it's very important. And you know, parents need to understand that if they've got a child they think that has the potential to be a player and get recruited as young as probably 8th grade, ninth grade, that they need to start getting them prepared academically for that. And that means probably sitting down with their coach and talking about that. It means sitting down maybe with their counselor and making sure they are all on board about what that student needs to be able to go play. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was at Pueblo, we had an open tryout in the spring one year, and this kid came in and had never seen her play. We didn't really know anything about her, but she blew our socks off. I mean, this kid could play. We're like, nobody's recruiting you. She was from a part of the state that was kind of isolated a little bit and everything. And so, I brought her up to my office afterwards and I said, hey, we want you to come here. We're not talking walk on. We want to recruit you. Well, we got to talking a little bit. She'd never taken an ACT or an SAT score. She'd never taken the test. And
Wow.
she's a senior getting ready to go. And I call her coach up right there with her sitting there. I go, does she not have a test? He goes, I don't know. I don't know if she does or not. Luckily, we caught the last test that was going to be given that spring to sign her in. And she fortunately got the score she needed, and we were able to bring her in. She was an all-conference player. She was a
Wow.
great player for us, but this kid was not prepared to
Mm.
go to college, and so we talk about levels of where your child can play, but if they want to be a college player, they need to start that academic process early to make sure they've got all their ducks in a row so that if the offer comes, boom, they can go.
Yeah, that's extremely important, Coach. And I'll say this, and this is one of the reasons why I started this particular venture here. I see a lot of players and a lot of parents so focused on the basketball portion, they neglect the academics. And we've had a couple of guests come on before you, and we all agree that eventually one day the basketball will stop bouncing and you will no longer have the knees and the back and the flexibility to run, jump anymore. The LeBron Jameses of the world are once in a generation type player. So you have to be prepared. And that's what attracted us to Georgia Southern, to you. We knew that at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that our child got the degree. And we had to understand that there was nothing more important than getting that degree.
Right.
We're going to let basketball take us there. But once she had the degree and the knowledge, that's something she'll never lose. Your knees may go, your back, and all the body parts will eventually start to fade on you. But your mind and your mindset and your work ethic and the degree, the knowledge that you've gained can never be taken from you.
Right.
And
Right.
so that was extremely important for us to make sure that our child accomplished that at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit more about the transfer portal. It has really changed the game.
Yeah.
It has changed the landscape of college basketball to the point where a school such as South Carolina can lose top talent but end up picking up 3 more top talented people to replace the one that they lost. How do you see this playing out in the landscape of the transfer portal, which has always been there, by the way, but the changing of the rule that you can play immediately now, that changed the ball game?
I'm a big fan of the transfer portal because I think it robs players of the opportunity to handle adversity and to grow and, to persevere. I tell you what, though, we've let the genie out of the bottle, Michael, and we're not putting it back in there. They may try to do some things with the portal. I hear people say, we'll give you 1 transfer free, and then, there's going to be a penalty, or we'll give you 2. There's all kinds of things that they're looking at with it, but it's just become such a part of college athletics, not just basketball, but college athletics. And I will say this: I don't like it, but at the same time, as a coach, man, you can turn your whole program around
In an instant.
particularly for a new coach. In the old days, you'd usually get a job in late March or April. Well,
Yeah.
by that time, the players were pretty well gone a lot of times, and so you were wasted a whole year. Nowadays, you get a job in April, man, you can bring in 10, 12 people that can play
Yeah.
and turn your program around. So from that standpoint, it's been good for programs, I guess. The other problem I have with the portal is the rich get richer. You take the Power 5 or Power 4 now, I guess, conferences, and they're going to watch a kid play at one of the other 5 conferences or D2 even, and they'll find somebody, this kid has grown. They've gotten better, 2 years stronger. Now we're going down and poach that kid,
Wow.
and take them out of there. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's hurt high school recruiting. I really do. I think it's harder for kids in high school now because people are using more and more of their scholarships on portal kids because they want to bring kids in. They're going to have immediate impact because they know if they don't win, they're going to get fired.
Right.
And you can't blame coaches for that. And I understand players wanting to go somewhere where they can have success. It's just gotten out of control. It's just, and I don't know exactly how you get it back under control again. Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's really, I don't want to say ruined the game, but it's tarnished the game a lot because fans don't have a chance to get connected to players. There's no loyalty.
That wraps up another episode of Recruiting from the Bleachers. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and I appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to join us next week for another insightful conversation. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube at Recruiting from the Bleachers. Like, share, and follow to keep up with the latest updates. And don't hesitate to leave your comments and questions. We'd love to hear from you. For a deeper dive into the basketball recruiting process, check out our book, Basketball Recruiting, A Parent's Perspective, available now on Amazon.com. Parents, remember, from the bleachers to the big leagues, the boardroom, let's keep cheering and steering our student athletes towards success. We'll see you next time.